after work. Today I want to do a video on, as the title says, cheap scopes versus expensive scopes. And I suppose it's a bit more of a, I don't know, commercial, political video. I'm not sure how you'd say that. But I suppose it's making sense of things for people. There is been for a while, there was, and I haven't got any scopes here because we're talking Chinese companies, we're talking American companies, we're talking Chinese manufacturing, Japanese manufacturing, European manufacturing, all over the place. All scopes are involved in this. Price point is very much what we're talking about. And I suppose it's to try and make sense of that for people a little bit. We heard with some of the Chinese manufacturers coming into the marketplace and starting to really lift their game. In some places, copying technology, they got used by American companies, by German companies or whatever it was to build scopes to get things cheaper, to try and get manufacturing costs down and get profitability up in what they're trying to sell and try and compete in the marketplace. They got to then see how this technology worked, and then that started to where they could start to do that sort of thing for themselves. So that was the start of the path. Ultimately, there's some other bits and pieces involved with that process, but ultimately what that comes down to is that they really are lifting their game, and there's some really quite decent Chinese manufactured scopes that are coming out there. And I suppose that moves into, that's a big threat for the manufacturers, either for the mainstream or the old school, a lot of the manufacturers that we know, which have scopes that are of generally a little better quality. Generally, there's certainly a lot more technology, a lot more development, a lot more costs that's gone into building those scopes because it's happened over the years and years and years. And they're larger companies with employing more people, and whether it's promotions or it's quality control or it's service or whatever it is, or it's a legal team, they're a lot heavier and cost more to build those scopes. And so those companies are going to be, it gets hard because then they're trying to compete against a company that has a lot lighter on its feet with the likes of Chinese. It has a lot lower labor cost content going into it, and they're a lot leaner and closer to the bone in the way that they're trying to sell things. So what I'm trying to say with all this is that if you just do things on a bang for the buck, and that's all you're doing things on, then there becomes a very strong reason to go with the new cheap, close to third world in places, or fresher company that is closer to the bone, because you're getting a better bang for the buck. But keep in mind something here. You get paid too. I suppose whether it's patriotism or it's just understanding of the situation to make things a little clearer. When it comes down to a fact of if all you care about is the amount of money you spend for what you get, then you always go overseas for holidays. You always, because it's cheaper over there, you always go to this place because it's cheaper. You go to the cheapest place because you want the best value for money. You're not helping pay for probably even your own wages, because there's the degree of, that's how our system works. You put money into here, you spend a little bit more, but it's also why you got a job, because it comes down to manufacturers can't afford to employ people in your area because your cost of living's higher, so you need better wages. This is certainly the Australian story. Then any company that is dealing with you needs to pay you more, which means they need to charge their customer more. So you keep outsourcing, going somewhere else to make it cheaper. Well, what's paying for the bills that you need to pay? And I get there's the other way of looking at things where, wait a minute, I've only got X amount of money, I'm getting screwed by the government, it's really hard, cost of living's high, so I've got to save where I can. I understand. That only gets worse the more you do of it. So I suppose that there's another thing that is, I suppose, part of this conversation, and you should understand it before I sort of say my piece on what I think is a sensible way to go forward with this. And that is a lot of the legacy scope manufacturers spend a lot of money on legal fees, a lot of money on legal side, a lot and lot of patents. I'm not going to mention any names, but some of them have more patents on things that they've done than car companies do. They really do try and control everything. And that's one of the things that the likes of China, to a large degree, is stepping around. They have always ignored patents and that type of thing because of the way they do that sort of stuff. Now, is that fair? Well, I would argue this whole world of having to patent something so you can make money out of it, that's a pretty crazy world as well. If it's a good idea, do it well and people will buy your product. If someone else copies it and does it better than you, then you do it better, sort of thing. I'm not really into the patent world either, but it is the way our world has run for the last 100, 150 years, patent it, and that's how you make your money. And a scope company's spent a lot of money on that. But I'd come back to, that's also paying for things. That's paying for other wages as well. Now, you may argue that the likes of lawyers and they make money, the amount of money they make, the likes of that sort of stuff, is that fair and reasonable? That's a completely different conversation. So what I suppose the way I would say this sort of thing is, I would say honestly, the very good scopes, there are qualities there that are not able to be competed with simply getting the likes of a lesser manufacturer trying to do a similar thing. There are some small qualities. Are they worth the amount of money? Well, I suppose that depends how you look at the scope. You look at it as to, it is this scope, I'm also supporting that scope company. It also has those extra refinements, which makes it better. There's a bit of status. There's a bit of, you don't want to pull up in this one-old truck. You want a new truck. That's the same sort of thing that we're actually talking about there. So there is a certain amount of that. There is a certain amount of patriotism. I'm supporting a company that they support the sport. They put a lot of effort into it. They did a lot of the heavy lifting in the R&D process, and I'm supporting that. So there is a logic, a patriotism, a support side of things that money is going towards. Also, you like the fact that people employ you to work with where you're working, and so you can see the value in paying for something a bit more expensive over there because, what goes around comes around sorts of thing. Only way I see how to do it, and this is something I struggle with in making sense of it because I got what some of the manufacturers up to. I get in some cases it appears to be sort of their gouging when you look at their infrastructure, and maybe some a little bit top heavy and they could maybe be a little better than that sort of stuff. Maybe CEOs don't need to be paid so much, that sort of thing. But largely that's not really where the cost is. The cost is in the overall of things and trying to make sense of it. So my way of looking at it, what I've come into what's reasonable. To think that Chinese manufacturers are the bad guys, no, they're people trying to make money too. So they have a lower cost of living, they are doing it closer to the bone, but they're also people who are trying to make a living as well. So my way of looking at it is a little bit from this pile, a little bit from that pile. Maybe 2 cheap scopes and 1 good scope. You only want to do this because it's got to be in this super, super low value. Well, okay, you've got to understand you're asking the world to change to where you aren't paid so much as well. So a little bit of a yin and a yang side of things. Certainly one of the things I'm also reacting to is people saying that, well, this scope here with this really expensive scope, it just shoots perfectly. It makes this rifle shoot perfectly. And this scope here, it doesn't shoot as well. It's not quite as accurate with this scope on it. That's a load of rubbish, okay? No scope is going to make you hit the dead center of dead center all the time. A little better dialing, a little clearer glass can help a little bit, but it is relevant. It's a little bit. And to the largest degree, and particularly as time goes forward, even the majority of the very cheap scopes have lifted so far, and I'm not talking spending $50 on a scope. I'm talking once you get into the bracket of where you have a decent tactical scope, they are very, very good for what they do. They don't have the high level refinements. You may deal with slightly less clearness. You may have slightly less light transfer. Maybe it doesn't track quite as well. You should always, if you want to be the first shot hit hero, you've got to tune your data always. You've got to go through and test it. Same as around the BC of the projectile is not exactly the same in one barrel to another barrel. It can actually change, believe it or not. That's also muzzle velocity, that's also how the rifle actually, the movement from impact, that sort of stuff. You've always got to tune it. Once you've tuned it to your reticle, if it's slightly off, then you're going to answer it. the likes of something changing, well, that's really cheap and rubbish sort of stuff, which you may still be able to find it, but largely in the really, really cheap stuff. But largely in the manufacturers that are starting to lift their game, they're really, to a large degree, copying technology. They're doing the same things as they're asked to do when they manufactured someone else's scopes, and they're then putting that into that same technology into there. So largely all that stuff is getting really well sorted out. But as I said, if you just come down to it's just bang for your buck, all you care about, you got to understand that what you get paid can also be affected by what you spend. That's the long-term side of things. A bit of patriotic, a bit of loyalty, a bit of support, that sort of stuff is part of what this is all about. It is a retail world, but it does all, what goes around comes around. So I don't know if that makes any sense. It is trying to make a little bit of sense of something that is, listen, it's definitely without any question, it's rattling the cages of businesses that take a lot to run. Maybe they've got to tighten their belts a little bit and start to compete also a little harder, but it's not as simple as that in a lot of cases. You know, a lot of money is spent in other places that you don't see, and just putting it into the thing that's in front of you is not how our world works. It's not how you're paid. It's just not how our world works. Anyway, guys, I hope that makes some sense. Definitely some food for thought. Hope you liked the video. Put all your comments. I'm sure there'll be some pushback on that down below, but put it down below. And yeah, thank you very much for checking in, and we'll catch you next time.